I am Maya Whitaker, 48 years old, and I have spent most of my adult life in the bustling world of restaurant management in Charleston, South Carolina, where the salty air mixes with the smell of fried shrimp and sweet tea, and where I learned early that a good meal could bring people together, even when the world seemed to be falling apart. I grew up in a family that owned a small family diner on King Street, and I learned to count change, to greet customers by name, and to keep a kitchen running like a well-tuned orchestra. And those lessons gave me a confidence that I could one day run something much larger than a single diner. By the time I was 40, I had risen through the ranks of a national casual dining chain called Harbor Table, a company that was known for its endless salad bar and its noisy bar area. And I had become the president of the company after a long stint as the senior vice president of franchise operations for a rival chain that specialized in tacos and burritos. The job was a dream, but it also came with a hidden trap that I would not see until a cold winter morning in 2015, when the current chief executive and chairman, a man named Victor Lang, called me into his glass office overlooking the Charleston harbor and told me in a tone that sounded like a warning that I would never be chief executive of Harbor Table. He said that if I could turn the struggling chain around, then perhaps after a few years I might be considered for the top spot, but that the decision was final and that I should not hold any false hopes. I felt a sting of betrayal because I had spent years proving my worth, and his words felt like a wall built to keep me from ever reaching the highest level, and I left the company that day with a heavy heart but a burning determination to prove him wrong. I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, where I started my own restaurant group called Southern Sunrise, a collection of small independent eateries that focused on fresh local ingredients and a warm, welcoming atmosphere. And I poured every ounce of my energy, my savings, and my reputation into building those restaurants from the ground up, hiring chefs who shared my vision, negotiating leases in historic neighborhoods, and learning how to market a brand without the backing of a large corporate budget. The early days were hard. I spent nights on the floor of my first restaurant, washing dishes when the dishwasher broke, and I watched as the bills piled up. But the customers loved the food, and the staff loved the family feeling. And slowly, the Southern Sunrise brand began to grow, earning a reputation for quality and for treating employees like family. And I felt a sense of pride that I had never felt while working for a big chain. As the years passed, my restaurants became profitable, and I started to think about how I could finally get back at Victor Lang for his doubt, and the idea began to form in my mind that I could buy Harbor Table itself, the very company that had told me I would never be chief executive, and turn it into something better. I began to meet with investors, to study the financial statements of Harbor Table, to learn that the chain was struggling with declining sales and a dated menu, and I realized that with the right changes, I could revive it and also make a statement that no one could ignore. I raised $2 billion from a group of private equity partners who believed in my vision, and I presented an offer to buy Harbor Table. And after months of negotiations, Victor Lang finally agreed to sell, perhaps thinking that I would simply be a caretaker and that the chain would continue to falter under my leadership. The day the deal closed, I sat in the same glass office where Victor had once told me I would never be chief executive, and I called him on his personal phone, and I said in a calm but firm voice, "We do not need two of us, so I am going to have to let you go." And I watched as his face went from confidence to shock, and I felt a rush of vindication that was sweeter than any success I had ever tasted. The next weeks were a whirlwind. I announced the acquisition to the public. I introduced myself as the new chief executive, and I began to make sweeping changes, updating the menu to include fresh seafood and low-carb options that reflected the tastes of the coastal South, renovating the dining rooms with bright colors and comfortable seating, and most importantly, I promised every employee that they would be treated with respect and that their voices would be heard, something that Victor had never done. The staff, who had been used to a cold corporate atmosphere, began to feel hope, and the customers responded with higher sales, and the stock price rose, and I could see the chain turning around faster than anyone had expected. But there was a twist that no one saw coming. As the company regained its footing, A former executive who had been loyal to Victor tried to sabotage the new direction by leaking false rumors about food safety, hoping to cause a scandal that would bring me down. I discovered the plot when I received an anonymous tip, and I confronted the traitor in a private meeting, and I gave him a choice. Either he could walk away quietly and keep his reputation, or he could stay and watch the chain I had rebuilt crumble under his lies. He chose to stay, and I offered him a different kind of justice. I gave him a severance package that was generous enough to let him retire comfortably, but I also made it public that he had been part of an attempt to undermine the company, and the media covered the story, and his name was associated with betrayal rather than success. In the end, Victor Lang left the industry altogether, and I took his place at the helm of Harbor Table, and I learned that revenge was not just about firing a nemesis, but about building something better for the people who mattered, the employees, the customers, and the community that had supported me from the start. Now I stand in the same office, looking out over the harbor that once seemed like a barrier, and I feel a deep sense of peace because I have turned a painful rejection into an opportunity to prove that perseverance and kindness can outshine any doubt. And as I walk through the kitchen of the flagship restaurant, I hear the clatter of pans and the laughter of staff, and I know that the story is not over, because each day brings new challenges. But I also know that the greatest revenge is living a life that proves the naysayers wrong while lifting everyone around you. And that is the legacy I will leave for the next generation of women who dare to dream big in a world that sometimes tells them they cannot.